I'd like to introduce our speakers. We have Jason Brown and Bart Forsyth. Jason is Vice President of Communications and Education of Envision Utah, and Bart is a Policy Advisor with Utah Waterways. And with that, I will pass it over to you two. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I'm Jason Brown, and I want to start with just a quick question, show of hands. Has anybody here ever lost sleep wishing you understood how Utahns tick when it comes to water issues? Raise your hand if you've lost sleep there. Maybe a little more pointed, has anyone ever seen their neighbor watering their lawn or watering their sidewalk during a rainstorm and wish that you understood what's going on in their minds? Yeah, so that is some of the questions that we were trying to answer here. We have conducted some research into what we think of as the values and priorities, the motivating things that are going on in Utahns' minds when it comes to water, and that's what we're going to share with you today. So first, just some quick introductions. I'm with Envision Utah. If you're not familiar with Envision Utah, we're a local nonprofit focused on growth in the state. We recognize that Utah is growing, and growth is hard, and growth brings a lot of challenges. So how we grow really matters. And so we bring people together to try and solve the big challenges of growth. And sometimes, like in this situation, that involves doing some research to try and understand what people are thinking, what people really value and prioritize when it comes to growth. And I'll let Bart give a little bit of an introduction to Utah Waterways.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, my name's Bart Forsyth, and this may be the first time you've heard of Utah Waterways. It turns out that it was created by the state legislature in the 2023 session. Our primary objective statewide is to advance water conservation, water use efficiency across the state of Utah. So we're all things really water conservation related. Our mission really, once again, is water use efficiency, and in doing that, these are some of the things we want to accomplish. We're just getting our feet on the ground. We're a small organization. We have about 5 employees. Not all of them are full-time employees, but we're very efficient, and we are resilient with that number of employees. But you see that we're looking to build partnerships, and Utah Waterways is really a public-private partnership going forward. We want to provide all of you and municipalities and others a wealth of information and resources and services going forward. We do want to enhance public education and outreach on water conservation and water use efficiency. And finally, we want to help advance important research, and we think this research that's been done, the Utah Water Value Study, really is an important part of our mission in understanding perceptions and being able to actually design messaging going forward. That this is going to inform our messaging. Utah Waterways will be leading the state water conservation campaign. That has been known as Slow the Flow, Save H2O for all these years. It actually got started in 1999, so it's 25 years old. You're going to see a bit of a facelift with Slow the Flow with everything that we're doing.
Okay, thanks, Bart. Yeah, at Envision Utah, we've been really proud to be able to partner with Waterways. And they were one of the primary funders of this research, along with the Office of the Great Salt Lake Commissioner, the Utah Division of Water Resources, the Nature Conservancy, and I hope I'm not forgetting anyone else. Okay, so let's dive into the research that we have. I'll give you just a real quick overview. This is something that we call a value study, and we've been doing these at Envision Utah for 25 years. It's a 2-part research process. The first part is a 5-day focus group. We had about 44 participants log on to a platform every day for 5 days, answer a series of questions. Then we take what we learned from those focus groups and build a survey. That survey went out in August and September to we got a sample of 800 Utahns. It was weighted a little bit to reflect population based on county, and we put quotas on for key demographic information. But we were able to collect a really great wealth of data. It was a 20-minute survey, so it was a long survey. It took a long time to find enough people to actually complete the 20 minutes, but what you'll be seeing today is mostly the results of that survey. But I did want to just point out that it's a multi-part research process, and so the options and wording even that we have in our results came from the conversations that we had in focus groups with Utahns. So without further ado, let's dive in. So first important thing that we probably want to know is that water is a top concern for Utahns, and it has been ever since we first started doing this kind of research. We've asked, what you're seeing on the screen here is the results of a question where we said, essentially, how important are these issues? Scale of 1 to 7. 1 is not important, 7 is very important, and we ask Utahns to rate these. Usually, water comes out as number 1. This year you can see it's barely edged out by housing and cost of living, but still, we have 2/3 of Utahns, or of our survey respondents, rating water as a 7. Then add another 20% if we look at 6, and then really 95% of Utahns in the state rating water as a 5, 6, or 7 in importance on a 1 to 7 scale. So it's front of mind. It's a very important thing for Utahns. The next data point here, we wanted to get a sense of, are people aware of what's going on? Well, we kept it pretty vague and just said the water situation in Utah. Do people feel like they are reading and seeing and learning things about the water situation in Utah? 59% of Utahns said, yeah, I'm aware of what's going on. I'm reading things, I'm seeing things. And of those 59% who are reading or seeing or hearing things about water in Utah, we have a breakdown of whether it was positive or negative here. 61% of what they're hearing and reading and seeing is negative. It's bad news, and with only 39% being positive. And that tees up, I think, pretty well this next data point, which is how concerned people are about water in Utah. So it was a pretty straightforward question. How concerned are you? We have an I don't know option at the bottom, but then it's a 5-point scale ranging from not at all concerned to extremely concerned. And what you can see is that 3 out of 4 Utahns are in the concerned scale, or in the moderately to very to extremely concerned range of, when it comes to thinking about water issues, with 38% being very or extremely concerned. So water matters to people, and that brings us to what I think might be one of the most significant things that we found in this research. This is a 2-part thing here. So 47% of Utahns, so almost half of Utahns, think that we probably have enough water to meet our needs today. But, there we go, all right. But most Utahns do not think that we will have enough water to meet our needs 20 years in the future. We have 57% of Utahns, in fact, saying or disagreeing with that idea, that in the future, we probably are not going to have enough water to meet our needs. So that leads us to then want to understand why they think and feel that way. What is it that's informing the levels of concern? What is it that's ultimately informing people's behavior around water? And so then we get to what's really my favorite part of these value studies. We go through this probing process to really understand how Utahns think about things. The details of the next few slides, don't sweat them. There's a lot of stuff on here. We don't need to go through all the details, but I just want to illustrate what we do. So basically, we'll start off and say, okay, what good does it do for you if we have a good, enough water to meet our needs? And people will say, well, of course, at the top of the list, like that gives me clean drinking water, gives me water for my daily needs. Then we start to see other things like food production, water for our communities, water for the Great Salt Lake. These are things that matter to Utahns, reasons that they are concerned about the water supply. And then we probe a little deeper and we say, okay, now what benefit do those things bring into your life? And we find, and they describe like, well, obviously it's essential to my life, to hydration, things like that. It's important to me to protect the environment. It's important that we have local food production or food security. And you can see some of the other things that go there. And then we go even further until we try and get to, or start to get to, some things that don't necessarily feel directly attached to water. These are motivating and underlying values that people have that can be applied to a lot of things, but so we're trying to build these connections from the things that people think about on a daily basis to the things that really matter in their lives. So we get to, a sense of well-being, a sense of balance or wholeness. And I do want to say one thing about that. We've done this kind of research on a number of topics before, on quality of life in Utah generally, on education, on air quality. This idea of sense of well-being and sense of balance is a new one. We hadn't seen this crop up. It crops up with water, though, this sense of balance or well-being or wholeness. And then we take these answers and we get to put them in these little webs to try and make these connections and see where Utahns are. And we have these statements at the top that kind of summarize what we call values orientations. So this one is clean sources of drinking water lead to a sense of personal safety, lead to hope for the future, or plentiful and readily available water, leading to this idea of well-being and personal safety. And when we were looking at the data, we started to get this picture we summed it up by saying water is life. This is kind of how Utahns are thinking about that. Now, if you're like me, you also started to look at this and said, what do we do with that? Like, how is this helpful? What insights do we actually gain from that? So then we add in some of these other fun webs, and we make it a little more complicated. And we pull in the Great Salt Lake, and we talk about agriculture, and we talk about water for growth in our cities and towns, and affordability. And then if you stare at this long enough, some things start to emerge, and it starts to make sense here, what Utahns are saying. And I want to show you a different one of these webs. This is one that we've done to understand sort of overall quality of life in Utah. How do Utahns think about quality of life in Utah? And what we have found consistently over the years, that there are three main things that Utahns think about, or that shape quality of life. The first one is they like living in Utah. We like living in Utah because we have connections to our community, or connections to family that are here. And then the second thing is we feel like Utah is a place where there's economic opportunity, where it's been affordable historically. And then the third thing has to do with the beautiful outdoors, the scenic beauty, the opportunities for outdoor recreation. These are consistently motivating things that underlie quality of life here in Utah. I imagine that if you're looking at this, you can probably identify with one or more of these as being something you really like about being in the state of Utah. Well, what we found as we looked at this is that really what Utahns are seeing here is a connection between all these different aspects of water and their underlying quality of life issues or quality of life priorities. Oops, let's go back. Okay, so in other words, this idea that we started with was water is life really sort of evolved into water is quality of life, which is a sophisticated understanding and something we were a little bit surprised to find. Basically, you can sum it up this way, most Utahns have this framework in mind that more thoughtful water use today ensures high quality of life, and they define high quality of life as things like community, family, economic opportunity, outdoor beauty, and recreation. So more thoughtful water use today ensures high quality of life in the future. In other words, or to put this in a more practical sense, if you think about your neighbor who's watering their lawn in the middle of a rainstorm, if you were to go and knock on their door and say, hey, what's your deal? Like, don't you understand that how we use our water has a big impact on our quality of life in Utah? They're going to say, well, yeah, totally. I definitely understand that. Which is a big deal, right? That we have as a society, as communities, as the water community, we've done a great job of helping make these connections where Utahns understand that water and how we use our water has a big impact on the things that they care most about Utah. But it's the next step. It's the so what do I do about it where we have a gap, where we have people who not understanding that watering their lawn and sidewalk in the middle of a rainstorm isn't the right thing to do. And so I want to show, just one example of that. What you see on the slide here, the most dominant thing, this bottom 90% of it, is people who believe that their personal water use is at or below average. So it's, the Lake Wobegon effect is what we like to say here. So, is that we have most people think that their water use is at or below average. And to be clear, like, this is statistically possible. It's mathematically possible to be that. But most things don't work out that way, where 90% of use is average or below average. So this is just one example of sort of the next step. After we understand the connection between water and the things we care about, we want to move to the next step, which is what do we do about that? And I'm going to hand the mic now or the clicker, I guess. He already has the mic. I'm going to hand the clicker to Bart to walk through some of the specifics about, or that illustrates some of these disconnects and some of the information that Utahns don't have beyond these connections.
So the respondents in this survey, they were asked in these 5 areas, where do you think the water is being allocated across the state of Utah on an annual basis? And you can see the results here. Agriculture and food production, of course, number 1. They were correct there. And then you'll see a couple of things. You can read a lot from this, but I think the area that stands out to me, which is important, is that they're estimating that indoor water use is actually greater than their outdoor use. And so this is conflicting for me because it seems like I have been spending my entire career trying to clear that perception up. The bottom line is, on a residential basis, most of the water that we're using is used on our landscapes outdoor, even though the water that we're using is only being used 6 months out of the year for outdoor use. Of course, we use indoor water year-round. And so this is an area that always has bothered me, and it continues to bother me to some extent, but the question is, how important is it really? And I hope I can answer that question in the next couple of slides here. So the respondents were also given this list of water conserving measures, and they were asked, okay, this is what someone else has come up with. Where do you think the top 3 are? And let's just take a look at the top 5. Avoid watering during the hottest, windiest part of the day. It's pretty good. Turn off the water when not in use. Change outdoor spaces to mostly grass to mostly native. So it shows up here because this is where the greatest water conservation potential exists, is in the yard. And then water yards fewer times per week, and then change outdoor spaces to essentially more desert-type landscaping. Okay. So then they were asked a little different question. What have you done to conserve water? And once again, name the top 3. And you'll see that the top 2 here are the exact same as on the other list, but in reverse order. And then it's fix leaks promptly, water yard fewer times per week, and then take fewer or shorter showers. So this is all good. All conservation is good conservation, but the changes to the landscape don't appear until later on down the list. So there seems to be a disconnect that we continue to deal with, and that is that a homeowner's water use, they don't necessarily associate their water use with outdoor use. And this is something we need to work on. That being said, taking those same 5 categories that you saw on that first slide, and they were asked, okay, do you agree in which of these areas are using too much water? And they agreed that yes, parks and sports fields, golf courses, using too much water. Outdoor residential use, too much water. So here's the deal. Homeowners can see that there's a lot of excessive use in the outdoor. They're just not really associating it with their own use. That's an area that we need to work on. Okay, they were also asked if you were to make changes to conserve water in your household, do you think it would make a difference? If you look at the grand scheme of things. And over half, which is great, said, yeah, I think it does make a difference. But a little less than half said, I don't think it's going to make a big difference. And I think this is something where we need to try to move the scale a little bit, because the bottom line is we all need to make changes in our landscape or even our indoor use. And if we each save a little, we all save a lot. I mean, that's really what we want people to understand. They were also provided these 4 landscape scenarios and asked about preference. And we were pleased to see that the least preferred was that first one, which is an all-turf landscape, all-grass landscape. And then also, though, the most least preferred is the all-water-wise landscape at the very bottom that does not include turf grass at all. But the most preferred, you'll see, is that third one down. Now, these are AI generated, by the way, but the third one down was the most preferred. And this is closest to what we're currently promoting as the kind of landscape that we need to have here in the state of Utah. And if all of you have heard the word localscapes, this is closest to what a localscape is. And if you haven't, if you don't know much about localscapes, Google it, look at localscapes.com, and you'll see 5 easy steps on how to convert your yards from a all-turf landscape to a water-wise landscape. So this is good news here. So what are some of the obstacles, the challenges, the hurdles that homeowners face in making changes? And they were asked, okay, I would be more likely to make changes to my landscape if, and it turns out that the top 2 has to do with money, if I can afford it. And so that's something that water districts, regional water districts are grappling with all across the state of Utah. And the deal is, do you all know that there's money available, incentives available to all of you? Every homeowner now in the state of Utah has the ability to tap into rebates if they're willing to go out and convert their turf grass to a water-wise landscape. By raise of hands, do you know? Were you aware that there are? Okay, well, that's pretty good. You guys are probably a little ahead of these 800 residents. Yeah. So the deal is my guess is that those rebates will continue to climb over time. And what you're seeing, though, is you're seeing water districts that have water conservation plans where significant amounts of turf grass need to be removed in order for us to meet our water conservation goals. And I'll also say that all conservation is good conservation, but if we learned a little bit earlier today in the open session, where what we really want to be doing is reducing depletion. You don't necessarily reduce depletion by conserving water indoors, but when you conserve water in your landscape, that's how you do it. And when you reduce depletion, that provides for more water for our ecosystems, essentially, and more water to the Great Salt Lake. So these are the 4 main water conservation-related brands that we use across the state of Utah, and you'll see that we have SLCo at the top, then Flip Your Strip, Localscapes, and Utah Water Savers. We tested those as far as familiarity or recognition of these 4 brands, and what you'll see is Slow the Flow Save H2O, which once again has been around for 25 years, has really good market penetration and very good recognition statewide. But the other 3 aren't quite doing as well with these 800 respondents. Localscapes, Flip Your Strip, Utah Water Savers. Utah Water Savers is the brand, the program that's being used for rebates, for water conservation-related rebates. This is something that we need to work on with our Slow the Flow program. And more than likely, you're probably going to see some kind of a consolidation where we can make it really non-confusing for people to be able to actually go in and tap into these rebates statewide. This is my last slide, I believe, and we also tested statements. What statements resonated the best with homeowners regarding their making changes to their landscape? And you see here, the top 2 are shown. Using native plants for most of your yard and reserving grass for the most heavily used areas can reduce your water use by as much as. Turns out if you convert an all turf landscape to a turf grass landscape to a localscape, you can save about 67% of your water, 2/3. And that results in a tremendous amount of depletion savings. And then that second one there, the greatest impact you can make on water conservation is to remove grass you don't use, like in park strips, and replace with. So the deal is we need to come up with the messages that work the best across the state, and this is why this research is so important to us, because this will inform and help us develop and design our messaging going forward. So with that, I think we're ready to take some questions from the audience.
Hi, thanks so much. This was super interesting. I was curious, just thinking about like sort of the pressures and social pressures people might feel to like change or not change their lawn. If you or anyone else had done research to see like at the neighborhood level if people are more likely or less likely to change their lawn over to a local scape if their neighbors have done something similar.
I think let's see if I go back. Is it on the previous slide? There we go. We asked this question when we were saying, complete this sentence, I would be more likely to make changes to my landscaping if one of the options was other households in my neighborhood were making those kinds of changes. And as you can see, it didn't fare super well. We expected, I think, that it would maybe be a little bit more motivating. The way peer pressure works and the way that people respond to peer pressure and describe how they respond to peer pressure, I think this is definitely an underestimate of the effect of peer pressure, but at least up front, people aren't saying that, oh yeah, I need my neighbors to do it.
Can I just add something to that? So I just made the change in my landscape. And I removed all the turf in my front yard and replaced it with a water-wise landscaping with lots of water-wise plants. And so far, I've been met with a lot of praise from my neighbors. And the interesting thing is, over the years where we've seen this happen, where we've seen changes in the landscape, all it takes is one person in the neighborhood to make that change. And then there's all these others that are going to jump on the bandwagon with you. And so it takes that first person. And then, because there's others that are thinking, yeah, you know, I wouldn't mind doing this, but I'm worried about what my neighbors are going to think. And once they do it, then it seems to open the floodgates and things can make some changes.
Oh.
Okay, I think I got the mic. In early 2022, the strike force addressing these issues said that the Great Salt Lake had a deficit of 1.2 million acre feet annually, and that agriculture used basically the same amount of water. So it seems to me, and that was 60% of the water that was used, so it seems to me that even if everybody, including agriculture, gave up 50% of their water, it would still not make up for the deficit that was identified by the strike force. It seems to me that the state of Utah needs to be looking for water from out of the state to help us out.
That's a Bart question.
Yeah, duly noted. So first of all, I would say that naturally we need Mother Nature to help out a little bit. From time to time, the last 2 years, we've had above normal precipitation, and hopefully we'll see that again this year. And we do see droughts, we see times of plenty, and so, but I think what we're seeing over the last 25 years or so are increasing temperatures and having impact on our snowpack and so forth. And you're right. It turns out that the state legislature has listened, and there are efforts currently. There's a new organization called the Water Districts Water Development Council that has an arm that will start be looking at some of those things, talking to neighboring states on is there a way to share resources. So we hear it, we see it, and we know that we've got to plan in that direction. Now, I'll tell you that for the most part, when you go talk to other states, is that you keep your hands off our water. So it's not going to be easy.
We have time for 2 more questions, so we'll do that one up front and then one more back here.
This is going back to whether your neighbors have made the landscaping change or not. Something I've noticed in my community, it's maybe not so much that your neighbors are doing it, it's not knowing who to call to do that. Because a lot of the landscaping companies are adept at doing traditional landscaping that uses a lot of water, And it's kind of a scary thing to rip out all of your grass and turn it over to somebody. But in my neighborhood, we've had a couple fantastic landscapers who've come through and transitioned a lot of yards to water-wise landscaping, and they have more work than they know what to do with. And people are willing to make that jump because they know somebody that is competent, that creates beautiful landscapes that are not a maintenance nightmare, you know. And so I think maybe part of that that didn't quite get captured in there is just feeling good about contractors and knowing who to call.
You know, we did hear that in the focus groups. We heard that same sentiment, that people feel like there's a huge knowledge barrier. You know, people don't know what native landscaping should look like. And then there's, you know, the supply chain issues. Where do they even go to get the plants? And are there enough of them if everyone were to start doing that? So yeah, I think what you said is absolutely true. And we did hear that a little bit in the focus groups as well.
Like if they started a water-wise landscaper guild or something like
Sure.
that, there's a market for it.
Yeah. Okay, last question I think was over here.
I was wondering about the impact of the fee schedule for water usage has on water use. I live in a town where there is a very large hookup fee to have water come to your house, but after that, the fee for per gallon usage is so low that my water bill is, as a single person, is the same as a family of 10. And so, with a yard, and I don't even have a yard. And so I'm wondering, like, if you change the fee schedule so that a hookup is less expensive and water usage is actually very expensive, that would have an impact on water usage.
There's probably some specifics that Bart can speak to a little bit more, but one of the things I did want to point out is as we were doing these values maps and these complicated things, over here on the far right side, the idea of keeping costs low, at least on the surface as people describe their motivations and what's important to them, it ranked surprisingly low. We were surprised that keeping costs low wasn't like the number one thing or one of the top 3 things that people were saying, yeah, this is what matters to me. So anyway, whatever that adds, I'll let Bart talk more about that one though.
Yeah, and it's a really good question. And I'll tell you that we've worked with a lot of municipalities over the years. And what a municipality really needs is revenue stability, right? And so in many cases, you'll see a base charge or an upfront fee that's not worked into the actual rate, and it does nothing with respect to provide an incentive to conserve water. And so there was legislation not too long ago, several years ago, I guess, that required tiered rate structures for water use. And I would say that it is a good practice to try to do the best you can by reducing those base fees as much as possible and putting the cost of water into the tiers so that there is a good financial incentive to reduce water use as you move into these upper tiers. I would also say that there are ways for municipalities to design water rates where if you're using water efficiently, you're going to pay less than you have been paying. If you decide to use water excessively, then you're going to pay more than you've been paying, and that seems to work pretty well. And those who wish to waste water, all you're doing is paying the cost of service. It's a cost of service formula. We're not arbitrarily saying you got to just pay more water. It's not a fine. It's basically you're making it hard for us to size my infrastructure and provide for these peak flows during July, and so you're going to pay the lion's share of the cost. It makes sense, and so this is something that Utah Waterways is really going to be helping our municipalities statewide on how to design an effective water rate structure that provides a good incentive to conserve water.
Okay, thank you. That's all for Q&A. Let's give another round of applause for our presenters.
Thank you, everyone.